All right, welcome back to the Elias Macko Show. 10:51 right here on CJAD 800. The man who drove a city bus into a Laval daycare, killing 2 young children, injuring 6 others, has been found not criminally responsible due to mental illness. Quebec judge ruling that Pierre Saint-Amand was suffering from psychosis at the time of the 2023 incident and could not distinguish right from wrong. Saint-Amand will be detained in a psychiatric facility, but the Crown is seeking to have him declared a high-risk offender. Hughes. Let's go now to Eric Sutton. He's a criminal defense attorney. Eric, welcome back to the program.
Good morning, Elias.
Explain not criminally responsible. What does this really mean?
Well, it means that the individual has a disease of the mind, a mental health condition, such that he or she cannot distinguish between right and wrong, or does not understand the nature and consequences of his acts. So I believe in this case there was evidence that would suggest that he understood that what he did would cause the death or could cause the death of these children by driving into a daycare, obviously, but that he could not distinguish right from wrong. So on that basis, he's held criminally non-responsible.
Of course, the family members of the victims, they're quite upset about this. And I was listening to one of these families, a mother, talking about she lost one child, still has 2 others, and was just talking about the pain that it's caused to the family, to the children that are still with us. And I get that anger. What do you say? What would you say to those families? Like, how would you explain why this is the right decision, especially for those that are dealing with the pain of what happened at that Laval daycare?
Well, it's so hard to really assuage the pain of the victim, their parents and families. In fact, there's probably nothing you can say that's going to alleviate it. And even had he been convicted, had he been found to be mentally fit and competent and been convicted, I'm not sure the pain would necessarily disappear either, or wane. But we have a system of justice I think is good. One of the foundational principles is that we don't convict people who, because of their mental condition, cannot distinguish between right and wrong. We have other means to deal with them. Maybe not. Maybe the public will find it far too clement and feel that their safety is put at risk. But we have means to deal with these people, but we simply don't convict them, and it's been that way since the very beginning of our system of justice.
Now, in our system, okay, so he's found not criminally responsible, but what are the mechanisms in our system to ensure that this person is not back out on the streets? So I know they're trying to have this person declared high risk. What does that mean, and how would that keep this person, in a psychiatric facility for at least a decent amount of time?
Well, first of all, there'll be an initial hearing where they will review his condition and the circumstances of the case and the victim impact statements, and he will be detained. That there's no question about that. And then there can be subsequent hearings by what's called a review board. And in the case of a high-risk offender, the review board can determine, because of the nature of the act and the mental condition of the accused, that there should not be a subsequent hearing before 3 years. So it can be extended 3 years. But at the very worst, from this accused standpoint, his case would be reviewed every 3 years. But in the intervening time, he'd be detained in the hospital. And if he's found as a high-risk offender, he would not be able to leave the hospital unless he's under escort, and it would have to be for the purposes of treatment. It couldn't be for any other purpose.
We're there.
So, yeah.
We're with Eric Sutton, criminal defense attorney. Eric, obviously in light of what happened at the start of this week, or over the weekend, I should say, in Vancouver, where 11 people lost their lives after someone took an SUV into a crowd at a Filipino festival, And again, we don't know all the details of that story. So maybe we don't want to make it story specific, but I go into, the point where now you have 11 people dead in that scenario. And perhaps we're going to hear the same arguments that someone is not criminally responsible. They didn't know right for wrong. Certainly seems like in the aftermath of that, there were some indications that this person was not well in their mind, right? Without getting into specifics of the case, like, are there any limits to that? Because, in Laval, 2 dead, six other victims. Vancouver, 11 dead. Like, I'm just trying to think in our current justice system, like, what if someone were to do something so terrible and it's 20 dead, it's 30 dead, and they can pull out not criminally responsible, or at least the defense attorneys can pull that out? Is there any limit there to how you use that defense of being not criminally responsible?
No, there isn't. It applies to any offense for which an accused is charged. It could be as simple as shoplifting or a mass killing. And you might say when someone commits a mass killing, they have to be somewhat mentally unhinged. The question is always, is there a mental illness or a mental disorder that is so severe that they can't distinguish right from wrong or don't understand the consequences of what they're doing? If they can meet that test and on what's called a balance of probabilities, then they will. I don't want to use the words benefit, but they will be subject to a different regime of state control. And we know, for instance, with Guy Turcotte, after he was initially found criminally non-responsible, obviously subsequently there were appeals and he was convicted. But after he was initially found criminally non-responsible, he was released after 3 years, despite brutally stabbing his 2 children to death. So I'm sympathetic, and there is a risk or a possibility that someone could commit a terribly heinous crime, but because of the disposition and perhaps progress while being treated, that person could ultimately be released well before they would have been had they been convicted.
Now, Eric, you're a criminal defense attorney, and I'm going to wrap up with this question. From your position, does the Canadian justice system, do we get it right balance-wise when it comes to this? I know other countries may be a little bit, some people would say draconian when it comes to this kind of stuff. Do you think, on the whole, we get to this being not criminally responsible?
Look, I don't know if we've had statistically too many examples of someone who was found criminally responsible, who was released, who then reoffended and committed a serious personal injury offense, not something minor like shoplifting or using a stolen credit card. I'm not saying it's minor, but really caused harm to someone. I think we would have to engage in that type of study to determine if our current regime shouldn't be tightened up or made more strict. But the foundational principle I do believe in, you don't convict someone whose mental health is such that they don't understand what they're doing. You have to find another legal regime to deal with them. And that's what we have and will always struggle with, because from the victim standpoint, it's just not enough.
Eric, always appreciate your perspective. Thanks for adding it to the show this morning.
Thank you for having me, Elias. Have a good rest of the day.
You too. That's Eric Sutton right there, criminal defense attorney.